Please stand by. The Eastern American seaboard, we don't even know what the hell it is.
Godzilla, 1998, unfolds as a spectacle-driven reimagining of one of cinema's most iconic monsters, but instead of leaning into its Japanese roots, it reframes the legend through a Western disaster film lens, blending large-scale destruction, military response, and a more grounded scientific perspective. Directed by Roland Emmerich, a filmmaker known for crafting visually explosive narratives, the film operates with a sense of urgency and scale that defines late 90s blockbuster cinema. At its center is Matthew Broderick as Dr. Niko Tatopoulos, a quiet, analytical scientist whose expertise in radiation mutation places him at the heart of an unfolding global crisis. Alongside him, Jean Reno delivers a composed and mysterious performance as Philippe Rocher, while Maria Petilio plays Audrey Timmons, a journalist whose personal connection to Niko complicates the situation further. The narrative begins far from the towering skyline of New York City, in the desolate expanses where nuclear testing has silently reshaped the environment. What appears to be a controlled scientific endeavor by the French government reveals its catastrophic unintended consequences when a colony of iguanas is exposed to radiation, triggering a mutation that evolves over years into something far beyond natural boundaries. That underlying theme subtly runs throughout the film, even as the story leans heavily into action and spectacle. As the mutated creature grows, it leaves behind a trail of destruction across oceans, signaling its presence through mysterious disappearances and unexplained wreckage. By the time it reaches the United States, the tension has escalated to a global concern. The government, unable to understand what it's dealing with, turns to Dr. Niko Tatopoulos, whose research into radiation effects on wildlife becomes the key to decoding the creature's behavior. Niko is not portrayed as a traditional action hero. Instead, he represents intelligence and observation, often standing in contrast to the aggressive military response that dominates much of the film's conflict. When Godzilla finally makes its presence known in New York City, the film transitions into full-scale disaster mode. The creature's design deviates from traditional depictions, appearing faster, more agile, and more animalistic, which adds a different kind of tension. Instead of a slow-moving, unstoppable force, this version of Godzilla behaves like a hunted predator, capable of evasion, surprise attacks, and rapid movement through urban environments. The city itself becomes a battlefield, with iconic locations transformed into scenes of chaos as the military struggles to contain something it barely understands. The film's pacing intensifies as repeated attempts to eliminate the creature fail, highlighting the limitations of conventional warfare against an evolving biological threat. Tanks, helicopters, and missiles prove largely ineffective, often causing more damage to the city than to the creature itself. This dynamic creates a recurring pattern of escalation, where each attempt to stop Godzilla only reinforces the idea that brute force is not the solution. Instead, Niko's scientific approach begins to uncover deeper layers of the threat, shifting the focus from destruction to understanding. One of the most critical turning points in the narrative emerges when Niko realizes that Godzilla is not just a singular threat, but part of a larger reproductive cycle. The discovery of a hidden nest containing hundreds of eggs introduces a new dimension of urgency. This revelation transforms the story from a containment scenario into a race against time, as the potential hatching of these creatures could multiply the threat exponentially. The tension here is not just about survival, but about preventing a catastrophic chain reaction that could extend far beyond New York. The setting of Madison Square Garden as the nesting ground adds a layer of irony and symbolism, turning a place associated with entertainment and public gathering into a breeding ground for destruction. As the eggs begin to hatch, the film shifts into a more intense, almost claustrophobic sequence, where the characters must navigate confined spaces while being hunted by rapidly multiplying creatures. This segment blends elements of horror and action, emphasizing vulnerability and the unpredictability of the situation. Throughout the chaos, the relationship between Niko and Audrey adds an emotional thread, grounding the story amidst the spectacle. Audrey's role as a journalist reflects the media's influence in shaping public perception, while also highlighting the ethical dilemmas of reporting during a crisis. Her connection to Niko introduces moments of tension and reconciliation, though it remains secondary to the overarching narrative of survival. Jean Reno's Philippe Rocher brings a contrasting energy to the film, representing a more calculated and covert approach to the crisis. His presence reveals the French government's hidden involvement, tying back to the origin of the mutation and adding a layer of political complexity. Unlike the overt military operations of the U.S., Rocher operates with precision and secrecy, suggesting that the solution may require strategy rather than sheer force. As the film moves towards its climax, the convergence of scientific insight, military strategy, and sheer determination culminates in a final confrontation that tests every approach attempted. The resolution is not just about defeating the creature, but about understanding the consequences of its existence. Even as the immediate threat appears to be neutralized, the film leaves behind an unsettling implication that the problem may not be entirely resolved, reinforcing the idea that actions driven by human ambition can have lingering, unpredictable effects. Visually, the film reflects the technological ambitions of its time, relying heavily on CGI to bring Godzilla to life. While the effects may feel dated by modern standards, they represented a significant effort to create a believable sense of scale and interaction between the creature and its environment. The emphasis on destruction, collapsing buildings, and high-speed chases contributes to the film's identity as a spectacle-first experience, prioritizing visual impact and intensity. The tone of the film oscillates between tension, action, and occasional humor, though it largely maintains a serious approach to its central conflict. The narrative structure follows a familiar disaster film formula, where an initial mystery evolves into a large-scale crisis, eventually leading to a coordinated effort to resolve the threat. However, what sets it apart is its attempt to blend scientific reasoning with blockbuster storytelling, even if that balance is not always perfectly maintained.